Ashwings, are you looking to make a nice little warrior deck as a beginner player for Flesh and Blood and not quite sure where to start? Maybe you've picked up Dorinthea Ironsong and you're like, well, I really like putting counters on things. Maybe I'll try her and see how she works. Today, I want to go ahead and talk about a nice little budget build for only about $100, and then even go into some upgrade paths for Dorinthea Ironsong in your classic constructed games. Welcome to the first episode of $100 Hero. Welcome on in, my wonderful Ashwings. It is another day, another time to be a Flesh and Blood fan. Today, I wanted to talk a little bit about our first episode of a series that we are doing here called $100 Hero, where I take any hero that is currently legal in the classic constructed format, and I build a deck for all of you new players, or even players who might just be wanting to try her out, or any of the heroes out, in this classic constructed format for only $100. Now, the good news is that with these $100, most of the cards are really only priced around a certain few. Most of the cards inside these decks are going to be bulk that you might already have at home. So you may even have 75 to 80% of the deck already sitting there inside that bulk box, which gives you an opportunity to go open it up yourself and give it a shot. I'd also like to take this time to suggest that even more veteran players into Flesh and Blood utilize these videos as a way to learn about new heroes and get a general idea of how they work. You can obviously add some of your own collection into the decks themselves to make them a bit stronger, but overall, it's a way for you to lower down your power level at your LGS for Armory Night if you're going against some newer players, and it's just a fun way to try out something new. So what I have here with the $100 hero for today is none other than Dorinthea Ironsong, the very first warrior in Flesh and Blood, all the way from the set Welcome to Wraith. We've got a lot of really awesome tech here for her, and I kind of wanted to just take this time for those new players to go over what she does and kind of give you an overall aspect of what she has as far as her playstyle. Now, Dorinthea can be played in multiple different ways, but currently the build I am showing you here for $100 is for her Dawnblade build. Dawnblade is a pretty effective card in the world of Flesh and Blood, strictly because if your opponent cannot provide correct blocking on nearly every turn, Dawnblade will continue to get stronger and stronger and stronger as time goes on, and if you're not prepared to deal with Dawnblade, you will feel its wrath later in the game. But let's talk a little bit about the hero itself, Dorinthea Ironsong. Her effect says, when your weapon attack hits, you may attack an additional time with that weapon this turn. It's a once per turn effect, which means that you can only do it once, but that allows you to attack with Dawnblade twice. That is your overall goal in the game, is to attack with Dawnblade twice. Just go ahead and swing that Dawnblade, and then if you let it hit, as long as you have given this card go again, you can then go ahead and attack with it again. It does only cost one resource, and that is incredibly valuable in the overall game plan of Dorinthea. But the point is just to swing Dawnblade once, hit, and then find a way to give it go again, and then hit again. That is very simple. That is the whole thing behind it is just that. So with that being said, let's take a little bit of a look into the armor and then the cards inside the deck and kind of give you guys a bit about what she does and how she does it well. So we have here in the armor set, we've got Helm of Sharp Eye. Now, this is not a super fantastic helmet in all regards, simply because this is just kind of a, you have to take a card off the top, and if it happens to be an attack reaction, then you can use it. But in most cases, you are not really able to do this in its best way, simply because you can only activate the ability if you control a weapon with power greater than twice its base. Now, a lot of the cards in the deck do pump up the power of the Dawnblade by 3 or even 4, and that is enough, well, at least with 4, it's enough to get it over twice its base power. But that's not always the case. You may not always be using the attack reaction of Helm of Sharp Eye, but if you do, it's great and it works out wonderfully for you. So usually in terms of like pitch stacking or anything like that, you can utilize that, but the effect itself is not really the main deal here because there are better helmets. Really, Helm of the Sharp Eye is just the least expensive of the warrior equipment, and it's got Battle Worn 1, so you can still block out a little bit there. Now we move into the chest piece here, Courage of Bladehold. Courage of Bladehold is a really wonderful Temper 2 chest piece in Majestic. It's fairly easy to get, and you can destroy this to have your sword attacks cost 1 resource less this turn. So if you know that you have a really, really wide turn you want to do with Dorinthea and your Dawnblade, you can easily destroy this, and it practically shaves 3 resources off of your line, which is really, really good. So obviously you're going to want to get that Temper 2 block value out of there. And then after, when it's just got, 1 defense value left on it, you can either use it to save your entire game plan in the future. If you're, somebody's coming in for lethal and you have that blocking potential, you can block with it, or you can use its ability to kind of give yourself a tempo gain if you happen to be blocking with too many cards and you need like a blue for your turn. Courage of Bladehold certainly helps a little bit in regards to reducing the value of those swords. Next, we have Braveforge Bracers. This is a tongue twister for me all the time, but Braveforge Bracers is a legendary from Welcome to Wraith. That's right, you can have legendaries in a $100 deck. That's crazy, right? So Braveforge Bracers, essentially the concept here is that it's got Battle Worn 2, so it's great at defending, and then it has a once per turn action. You can pay a resource to have your next weapon attack gain +1, and you can only do this if your weapon is hit. So you're going to want to do this on your second or even third attack with Dawnblade in a chain, but it's the only time you can do it. You can't use it on the first attack. This +1 power tends to actually be really detrimental because if you are going in with just a Dawnblade for 6, and now you're coming in with a Dawnblade for 7, it is definitely a better break point for you, and it's more difficult for your opponent to block out. So always good to keep in mind. And then also if you've hit, you're going to keep those counters on Dawnblade, and you're going to do that there. Next, we have Refraction Bolters. This is just a common. It's another great common. It is run in like Dawnblade specific, very high level Dawnblade specific Dorinthea decks. It's got Battle Worn 1, and if you hit with a weapon, you can destroy this to give it go again. So great way there. And then I also realized I didn't go over Dawnblade a little bit here for you. So Dawnblade itself, you attack for 3 by paying 1 resource. And if it is the second time that this is hit in a turn, you put a +1 counter, +1 power counter on Dawnblade. And then at the beginning of your end phase, if Dawnblade had not hit this turn, you'll remove all +1 counters from Dawnblade. So it's kind of one of those, you want to make sure you're getting a hit in every single turn. If you can guarantee that you're going to hit twice, awesome. If you can't guarantee you're going to hit twice, at least try your best to hit once, so you can keep your counters on your weapon and also obviously provide a bit of damage. So now we're going to move into the deck. Again, this is a deck for only about $100 here, and I wanted to go over what we have in the deck and kind of why it is there. Give you guys a rundown as to what Dorinthea is supposed to do, right? So let's start a little bit about the cards that have Go Again. So the concept again from this is that you're going to be attacking with your Dawnblade. You're going to have to find a way to give it Go Again and then make sure it hits, right? Because if you don't hit with this weapon, then you cannot use Dorinthea's ability. And if you hit with the weapon, you then need to find a way to give it Go Again after it is hit, or, as it resolves as it's hit. So that is the concept here, is you need to make sure your Dawnblade hits at least once and then has Go Again, and then you can attack with Dawnblade again. Because I have seen from a new player perspective that Dorinthea's ability is a little hard to explain initially, because it says if it hits, you can attack with it a second time, but you do still need to have the action point to attack with your weapon. So keep that in mind. But the cards that allow your Dawnblade to get go again is the use of a lot of the cards that came out of heavy hitters with their agility tokens, as well as some very powerful staples for Dorinthea in and of herself. So let's take a look here. Lead with Speed is a wonderful pump for your weapon. It gives +3 to your next warrior attack, which includes your weapon, and then you create an agility token. Agility tokens are destroyed at the beginning of your next turn, and then your next attack gets go again. So in a way, you are setting up your next turn to be more powerful by having a token give your weapon go again, as opposed to having to use a card from your hand. That allows you to utilize a lot more of your resources and your value in just making sure your Dawnblade hits, and not so much about the fact that it's going to get go again. So Lead with Speed, a great addition there. Then, of course, we also have Spoils of War. This is a Majestic in this deck, and it is really good, right? Next weapon attack this turn gets +2 and go again, so it's already giving your weapon go again. And then whenever a weapon you control hits, you can create a copper token. Now, the copper is not so much a win here. You can use the copper to draw cards if you absolutely need to. Copper is just a little token currency you can pay for resources to draw a card. This is normally if you have like an all blue hand and there's not much you can do about that. You can utilize that to draw into a new card, possibly a red, to give a lot more power to your weapon. So Spoils of War is really good. The whole concept, though, is that your next attack gets +2 and go again. So it's a great thing. You start your turn by playing a Spoils of War, and then you don't have to worry about your Dawnblade not having go again. The next one we have here is both Red and Blue Warriors Valor. Red and Blue Warriors Valor, very simple here. Next attack this turn gets +3, and if it hits, the attack gains go again. So this fits a lot into what you want to do with Dorinthea already. You want it to hit, and if it does hit, it gets go again. So it kind of resolves itself, right? You don't have to use two cards, one to give it go again, one to give it damage. This one does both of that for you, and then you can just utilize your attack reactions to kind of, you know, make sure that this hits to get that go again. So Warriors Valor is very good. The reds and the blues are great. I thought about running the yellows, but I'm not too sure. I don't think I need to. Glistening Steelblade's probably one of the more expensive cards in this list. It's about $18, I think, is what they're going for right now. But it's a Dorinthea specialization, so you can only use this card in Dorinthea. But it does say your next Dawnblade attack this turn has go again. And whenever Dawnblade hits a hero this turn, put a +1 counter on it. So incredibly powerful, because for one resource, you know you're immediately getting go again on your Dawnblade. And then whenever it hits, you get an additional +1 counter on it. So you could possibly get 2, maybe even 3 Dawnblade counters on your Dawnblade in one turn if your opponent does not block efficiently. So it's a very powerful card. It really forces the tempo into your favor, because it forces your opponent to give them, you know, they have to give you their entire hand in most cases to get this done. But we are only running 2 of them because it was not in budget to have 3, but 2 is a fantastic start. We're then also playing 3 Ironsong Determination. This is just a great way that if you happen to get a lot of counters onto your weapon, even if you don't, honestly, even if you don't have a lot of counters on your weapon, playing this for 0 and giving your next, your Dominate and +1 until end of turn, that means that you can attack with that Dawnblade. Even if you have 1 or 2 counters on your Dawnblade, playing this and then attacking with, you know, the weapon is really putting your opponent in an awful position and is not going to be able to block efficiently with that Dominate keyword. Dominate means that your opponent can only block with 1 card from hand. If they do have a defense reaction in Arsenal for them to play to block out additional damage, then they can certainly do that, but they cannot block with more than 1 card from hand, which means that you're more than likely leaking through a little bit of damage, especially after you tack on all the attack actions and stuff like that. Now, I realize that is not a card that gives go again, but it is go again in and of itself, so you just play this and then your other thing. Back to the cards that give go again. Glint the Quicksilver, super great. It's a blue card, it blocks 3, so it gives you resources, blocks 3, and you can play it as an attack reaction to give your weapon go again. So this is kind of like a bluff, to be like, oh, they didn't play anything to give you go again, so you're just coming in for raw damage and you're not going to be able to do anything else. If you play Glint the Quicksilver, you'll give your target weapon go again. And the best part is we get to see in this keyword here, reprise, a big thing in Dorinthea decks, is that if the defending hero has defended with a card from their hand this chain link, you draw a card. So it's very, very wonderful if your opponent has already blocked, and you can utilize this to draw yourself a card on top of it. Reprise is a keyword that is very, very good, and it's usually only seen a lot in Dorinthea, in which if your opponent blocks with a card from hand, you get an additional effect. So you put your opponent into a position where they want to block, and then they end up blocking from hand, or maybe they just block just enough to take a little bit of damage as opposed to all of it, and then you still get a reprise effect to get all that through. Very good. Goblet of Blood Run Wine. We're only running 2 of these, but you create an agility and a vigor token. So we already talked about agility tokens. Let's talk about vigor tokens. This is the only one that's going to get you a vigor token right now, but vigor just says at the start of your turn, destroy this and get a resource. So you'll have a resource and you'll have a go again token on your next, to be destroyed at the beginning of your next turn, giving you a nice setup for you to block effectively on your, on your opponent's turn and get that damage through. Hit and Run is our other go again card here. Your next weapon attack this turn gains go again, and if you've attacked with a weapon this turn, your next attack this turn gains +1. You're not really going to be using it for its secondary effect, but if you have the opportunity to, you certainly can, because you can attack with Dawnblade, give it go again with something like Glint the Quicksilver, and then you can even play things like Twinning Blade to attack an additional time with your sword this turn as a reaction to your second sword hit. And then you can, you can hit and run that thing. It's a whole bunch of stuff, right? So like essentially you swing with your weapon, give it go again with Glint the Quicksilver, and then you play hit and run, give your next weapon attack go again, and it'll have +1. So now it'll be coming in for 1 more damage. And then as a reaction, you can play Twinning Blade, which says you may attack an additional time with target sword this turn for 0 during the reaction step, and then you can attack with your weapon a 3rd time, right? So +1 on this here, and then you get into your next ability. So 3 times is normally the max a sword can swing for in a Dawnblade build, but overall, it can happen. A card that we are also using in the sideboard here to get go again is Shift the Tide of Battle. Now, you can run this in the main board if you like it a lot. Target warrior attack with power greater than its base gets go again, and the next time an opposing hero is dealt damage this turn, create an agility token. So if you're looking to deal damage at least once, you can get an agility token on your turn. And then also you can make sure that your weapon has go again if you already pump it up with a different attack reaction, or maybe even with something like a Warrior's Valor or a Spoils of War. Very effective. But let's talk about the rest of the deck, right? What does the rest of the deck do? The rest of the deck provides a lot of disruption and also power to your weapon. So when you look at things like Commanding Performance, a Majestic in the set, it is really great because this is, in a way, Command and Conquer. For those of you who are new, you might not know what Command and Conquer is, or you might be looking at the pricing of Command and Conquer and go, oh boy, that's a lot. Commanding Performance is like Command and Conquer, but for warriors. Because as a warrior action, it pumps up your next warrior attack by +3, so just like any other pump we tend to have in this deck. But it also says until the end of your turn, your warrior attack gets, when this is defended by 1 or more attack action cards, destroy a card in the defending hero's arsenal. So if your opponent is playing a ton of attack actions and they want to block out damage coming in from Dawnblade, then they need to make sure that they don't block with those attack actions. But it also ruins their whole thing, because if they block with even 1 attack action, they lose their arsenal. So it's not that terrifying if your opponent doesn't have an arsenal, but if they do and they're trying to save up for that really big combo turn of theirs, Commanding Performance is a great way to disrupt that. We do also have other pumps like Sharpened Steel. Next weapon attack this turn gains +3. Then you also have things like Steelblade Supremacy, another Dorinthea specialization. Until end of turn, target weapon gains +2, and whenever this weapon hits, you draw a card. and then you have go again. So this is a great way to kind of force your opponent to block effectively. It's a very, very valuable card in the deck. We then also have, again, that Ironsong Determination is another great little pump there. We even have, that's it actually. You could theoretically play Precision Press, not a bad one, right? Your next Sword or Dagger attack this turn has go again and piercing 1. So if this was your go again ability, this is another go again card, Precision Press, that I did not go over, but very nice card. And it helps if your opponent has a lot of armor, because piercing will allow it to get an additional +1 to its value there. But then let's go a little bit over the reactions, right? So Ironsong Response, super great. Again, we're seeing that reprise ability here. It's a staple in nearly every warrior deck because it's for free. If your opponent defends, you just get +3 onto your stuff. So it's like, it's effectively blocking out their block by giving it +3. Very good. Out for Blood, another great reaction here. For 1, your target weapon gets +3, and if they defend it with a card from hand, they get another +1 on their next attack. So you're pumping up your next attack, and then you're also pumping up the current attack. So that's very valuable, especially if you're going into your next sword swing. Out for Blood is very good there. And then we have cards like Puncture. Target sword or dagger gets +3 and piercing 1. Again, if your opponent is blocking with armor, this is a great one to use on that because you're able to just kind of bash past their armor and make it happen. Rout is an incredibly good attack reaction. We are only running 2 of them because it does cost 2. And in most cases, you don't want anything over 1 resource for a lot of things, but 2 is fairly good. And that's because your target weapon gets +3 like all the other ones do in the reaction step. But the good news is that if they defend it with a card from their hand, you can return target non-equipment defending card to its owner's hand. So you're effectively taking cards that they've put onto the chain link to block, and then you can play Rout and then put one of those cards back to their hand, allowing you to leak damage through unless they have a defense reaction to block out the rest of it. But Rout's a very, very effective, and it's kind of this is one of the ones you want to use towards the end of the game where you have a lot of blues left in your deck, and you can just come in with a really powerful Rout and just sneak by a whole bunch of damage. Next up, we have our Sink Belows. These are defense reactions. This is just to help us prevent a lot of damage on our turn. It also helps cycle a lot of the cards out. If we happen to have an all red hand with a Sink Below, we can play Sink Below and then block out, put one of our cards that we maybe not need from our hand, put it underneath our deck, and then draw a new card and hope for something like a blue. And that'll certainly help out. A blue or a yellow, really, just anything with more resources. Take It on the Chin is an instant, but it's a really great instant. This is another agility token creator in which you can play this at instant speed and you will end up getting a agility token because it will prevent 2 of the next damage that's being dealt to you. So if your opponent's coming in for 4 and you want to block with just 2 instead of taking a whole card from your hand in another means, you can play Take It on the Chin. It'll prevent a little bit of that damage, and then you get an agility token. This is also a good card to prevent arcane damage as well. So you can prevent really any kind of damage, whether it be arcane or like a hurl, something of the sort, except hurl's probably only really going to deal 1 damage, so you're not going to get the agility token there. But anything that's going to deal you 2 damage that you wouldn't be able to prevent otherwise, throwing a Take It on the Chin there is very, very good. And you get the agility token, which helps you on your next turn. Let's see what we have not talked about yet. Singing Steelblade, another warrior attack reaction. Dorinthea specialization, so only Dory can use it. Target weapon gets +1, so not as powerful as a +3, but you do have the reprise ability. So if your opponent has already blocked with a card from hand, Singing Steelblade also gets the effect of if the defending hero has defended with a card from their hand on this chain link, you search your deck for an attack reaction card, banish it face up, then shuffle your deck and you can play it this turn. So if you did not have a way to get go again on your weapon and you're able to make it hit with this additional +1 value here, what you can then do is go search for something like a Glint the Quicksilver, play Glint the Quicksilver at its speed because you are using Seeing Steelblade in the reaction step. Not only will you get the reprise effect from Glint the Quicksilver because you already know your opponent had blocked with a card from hand, but your target weapon attack will also get go again, which allows you to attack with the weapon once more. So very, very powerful. Twinning Blade, you may attack with additional time with your target sword this turn. This is the only way you're really able to attack with Dawnblade 3 times in a turn. So if you have a really wide turn, Twinning Blade is a great step there, especially if you can Twinning Blade on turns in which you have Ironsong Determination up, because this gives, again, dominate to your weapon until the end of turn. Not just your first Dawnblade attack. Your target weapon +1 and dominate till end of turn. Very, very effective, and really helps kind of bring home that damage and making sure you're hitting. Then our final one here, we're running 2 Overpower. This one costs 3. You're normally not playing this, but if you do have a lot of blues in your hand and you happen to have this is +4 onto your sword. Most of your reactions have +3 on them, so your opponent usually knows how to block effectively if they're trying to block out 3 total damage in addition to their to the 3 on Dawnblade. But Overpower brings in 4, so you never know when they're going to have it, but most people don't run reds or anything. Normally the blues are good enough for that there too. And now we're going to move into what we have here in the inventory, right? We talked a little bit about Shift the Tide of Battle. The inventory is also the sideboard, for those of you who may not be aware of the terminology for Flesh and Blood. The inventory is the sideboard. In the sideboard, we're running stuff specifically for certain heroes that maybe don't want to block, or heroes that really have very go tall abilities, and you want to prevent that. We also have Arcane Prevention here. So we have Ironsong Pride, very, very neat card. I would even consider putting this in the main deck when you're playing, if you have the space for it. If you need like because you don't need to play with 60 cards. 60 cards are the minimum for a deck, but you can play with more. Ironsong Pride is certainly a good card to put in there. It doesn't block for anything because it isn't instant, but at instant speed, you can use this kind of like an attack reaction to put a +1 counter on target sword you control to give it additional value. And then when it leaves the arena, remove all +1 counters from swords you control. The beginning of your end phase, if a sword has not hit this turn, destroy Ironsong Pride. So this is effectively just a floating Dawnblade counter. In a situation like this, Ironsong Pride might not be the best. And the only reason I say this is because in the Rosetta meta, there are rune blades that can take auras and pop them back to your hand, or even just destroy them wholeheartedly. And if Ironsong Pride leaves the arena, you get rid of all your +1 counters for your sword. So I could see there being an effect to not play this. I would take this out if you are playing against anybody like an Aurora, or you're playing against a even like a Florian or a Viserai. Most of the time, you're not going to get a lot of value off of this one here. But if you're playing it as something like a wizard or something of the sort, this isn't a bad one to have in there for some additional value. Then we're also running some Steelblade Shunts. We're running 2 red and 3 blue Steelblade Shunts in here. These are for really, really big attacks, things like Azalea and with those dominated arrows and Ranger, as well as any Guardians you might be going against, or even Brutes. Steelblade Shunts are really good because you can, for 1 resource, as a defense reaction, you can play it and you defend for 6, which is a lot, right? It's far more than Sink Below. But if you block a weapon attack, it deals 1 to the attacking hero. This is a card I would put in if you were looking to play against Enigma, because Enigma's attacks with Cosmo are weapon attacks. So it is incredibly important to run this because they won't be able to prevent that damage outside of ward, and so you'll be blowing up something on their turn anyway. It's not unpreventable, so it doesn't blow up their whole board, but it is a great way to kind of just go, okay, ping you for 1, and they have to do with something about that. Then, of course, we talked about Shift the Tide of Battle. We are then running 3 Null Rune equipment. Null Rune Hood, Robe, and Gloves. These are only going to really be played if you are going to be going against a Wizard or a Rune Blade. For a Rune Blade, you're probably just going to get rid of, I would say you're probably going to get rid of the helmet here, and you're just going to play Null Rune Hood. But if you're going against a Wizard, you're going to want to replace all 3 of these with all 3 of these. Keep your Refraction Bolters. That way you can get go again on your attack sometimes. And you should be good to go. Arcane Barrier effectively just says you can, if your opponent's going to come in with arcane damage, you can pitch cards from your hand in order to pay resources to prevent that arcane damage. So that's effective there. That is the whole deck, right? That is everything for Dorinthea. I know we kind of went like out of order. Normally you start here and then go down the list, but I wanted to go over what cards do what their purpose is in the deck, and why you should be running these cards for these purposes. Now, this is mix and match. You can obviously do however you wish, right? Because there's a lot of things to do here. Again, there are other builds for Dorinthea as well. If you wanted to play something like her Axes build, Axes Dorinthea is Hatchet of Body and Hatchet of Mind. Another very great build because it's a lot more aggressive. You're putting a lot more pressure on there. You're able to use cards like Spilled Blood. And there's some great like axe tech specifically. And the good news is that like all of Dorinthea's specializations still work with those axes. So it is still effective, but with keeping the blade, the Dawn Blade build here, let's go ahead and take a look at what changes happen in the next iteration, right? I didn't bring this to its full power because frankly, Dorinthea changes so frequently. But something I did want to say is that if you go and you add $300 to the deck, right? If you add not even 300, matter of fact, this is, now that I'm looking at it, only $200 additional dollars to the deck. You can play Dorinthea at a fairly high level while also getting cards that are going to be useful for you for the rest of your time here while playing Flesh and Blood. And that's because what we're changing here, if we look at the versions, we are adding in a Crown of Providence, we're adding in a Findell Tunic, and we're adding in one Glistening Steel Blade. We're removing the Courage of Bladehold, we're removing the Helm of Sharp Eye, and then we're removing one of the Ironsong Determinations. Ironsong Determination, while it's good, Glistening Steel Blade is just significantly better. So with that being said, what do these cards do? Crown of Providence blocks for 2 and allows you to take any card that's from your arsenal or hand and put it to the bottom of your deck and then draw a card when it defends. So it's incredibly powerful if you're trying to go in with like a 5-card hand. Maybe your opponent tries to play something like Arsenal Disruption and you want to make sure that your arsenal is not destroyed, but you can also utilize the value to get a 5-card hand still on your next turn. You can block with Crown of Providence, get that card from your arsenal to the bottom of your deck, draw a 5th card, and then block however necessary for future attacks. Findell Tunic is absolutely, I would say probably incredibly crucial to this deck. While the 2 block power on the chess piece for Courage of Bladehold is really good, and then also the reduction in cost for weapons is good. Findell Tunic, you get a free resource every 3 turns, and that free resource can be used to pay for anything like, you know, lead with speed. It can be used to pay for reactions. It can be used to pay for defense reactions with Steel Blade Shunt. Like there's a lot of things that you can use, and you can even use it to pay for your weapon attack. So having that one additional resource is really effective in the deck, and I think it's just the way you should be playing it. And then of course we did add that 3rd Glistening Steel Blade. This is easily one of the best cards inside the deck, which is why it's like $20 a piece. So I definitely suggest picking up another copy. If you can get 3, get 3, right? If you can only still afford the 2 is still fine. You're doing something there. But that's really it. That's the big change, right? I added 3 cards into the deck and it added $200 in value. Now, you're thinking to yourself, Alex, that's crazy. $200 in a matter of 3 cards should not be how this works. These cards should be significantly less. Well, the good news is that they're not less because you can use them in other decks. And this is where I was kind of moving forward with this. Like Glistening Steel Blade, you can obviously only use in Dorinthea. The only hero you can use this in is Dorinthea because it's Dorinthea specialization. But because both Crown of Providence and Findell Tunic are generic pieces of equipment, they can be used in any hero in Flesh and Blood, so long as the cards are not banned. And that is incredibly effective when you're trying to build new lists, when you're trying to move further into the game. Shoot, if you forget this entire deck and you don't, let's say you don't even want to play Dorinthea. I don't know why you're watching this if you don't want to play Dorinthea, but if you don't want to play Dorinthea, if all you do as a new player is buy Findel, Spring Tunic, and Crown of Providence, you're already in a better spot than you've ever been. But that's why a lot of these upgrades are really wonderful, right? Is because if you're just upgrading to this general area and you're adding a couple $100 more into here for both of these pieces, you're still spending less than what you would for most decks and other TCGs. So you're in a pretty okay spot. Most of your deck can be bulk, and as long as you have this and this, you're still doing pretty good as far as your overall play pattern. But I want to put a lot of the focus whenever we're looking at our budget builds. I wanted to put a lot of the focus in the main deck, because if your deck doesn't have a lot of these, then your overall strategy does not work. So having cards like Glistening Steelblade and Steelblade Supremacy, Spoils of War, Commanding Performance, all these cards are cards that are very helpful towards your overall game plan as a Dawnblade user into playing Flesh and Blood. So hopefully you guys enjoyed today's video. I know, that was a lot of talking, but I do want to make sure that everybody is understanding of what the cards are, how the hero works, and kind of, what you'd expect to see from a strategy in regards to Dawnblade Dorinthea. It's a very popular hero. Dawnblade Dorinthea has been, or just Dorinthea in general, has been a very popular hero since the beginning of the game. She was the first warrior to ever be released, and she still has a whole lot of awesome, reigning champions to do. I know Dorinthea had just won a Pro Quest, if I recall correctly. So she's still viable. If you are a master at warrior and you like the concept of warrior, of, using attack reactions to kind of bluff your opponents into thinking they're safe, and then giving an additional value into your weapons, slowly growing those counters on the Dawnblade and becoming an unstoppable force of just destroying your opponent with incredibly powerful weapon attacks, then Dorinthea might be the hero for you. But let me know what you guys thought about the video down below. And I also wanted to really make sure that this is clear. I'm not a warrior main. So if Josh Lau comes into here, who is a warrior main for sure, and says, hey, Alex, that was an awful video. It is what it is, right? I'm not a warrior main. I don't know too much about the overall ins and outs and the advancements of the class. But what I do know is that Dorinthea, if she's playing Dawnblade, wants to attack, hit, and get go again. And that's all she wants to do. So that is the concept there. But again, let me know what you guys think about the deck down below. I'm always happy to hear from you guys. You can consider this kind of like a, beginner deck tech for Dorinthea. And hopefully it's something that can lead you into the warrior path and kind of show you about the class and see whether or not it's something for you. So thank you so much for watching. I appreciate your support. You can always go ahead and show some more support by hitting the like button down below. You can also subscribe to the channel as well if you have not already. And also, we do have channel memberships. Channel memberships are a great way to support the channel financially and help keep the lights on, but absolutely not necessary. You do get some perks in regards to your access to the Common Language, our Flesh and Blood podcast. You get that about a week earlier than everybody else does. And then you also get access to emotes and loyalty badges and stuff like that for when I do live streams. So if any of that fits your fancy, you can always become a channel member, but it is absolutely not necessary. I'm just thankful you're here enjoying the video. So thank you so much, and I hope you continue having fun in the Flesh and Blood. And I'll see all of your beautiful faces in our next video.